Welcome to the Stoic Responder Podcast. I'm your host, Christopher Healy. As a special agent who spent more than 15 years conducting large-scale fraud, money laundering, and public corruption investigations, Stoic philosophy provided a mindset edge that became the foundation of my professional success. My mission today is to share those same ancient mindset lessons with you so that you can turn obstacles into opportunities and adversity into advantage. Time to muster up. All right, folks, welcome back to the Stoic Responder Podcast. Title of today's episode, The Best Answer to Anger. Folks, before we jump in and talk about this, I want to take a moment to remind you to check out our favorite 501c3 organization that supports the law enforcement community. That is, of course, the Overwatch Collective. The Overwatch Collective is a nonprofit and podcast funding therapy sessions and supporting mental health initiatives for our first responders, our veterans, and their families. Their motto is, one more is one less, and I take that motto to heart because one more individual we can provide services to is one less statistic. You can check out the Overwatch Collective at theoverwatchcollective.com. If you go over to that website, you can make a donation, you can buy some gear, you can purchase a ticket to their annual fundraiser, which is coming up on August 24th in San Mateo, California. Greg and his people are doing great things for the law enforcement community and for the veterans community. Please, 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 please support their efforts because they are doing so much to support the well-being of our heroes, of our first responders. All right, as I said, the title of today's episode is The Best Answer to Anger. I'm going to start you out with a quote from Marcus Aurelius. It says, the best answer to anger is silence. Folks, let's take this into a kind of direction that some of you may be familiar with. The term HALT. Now, any of you who are in the program in Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous, you may be familiar with this term. HALT is a reference to the most common triggers for relapse. It stands for hunger, anger, loneliness, and tiredness. That's HALT, hunger, anger, loneliness, and tiredness. Now, this mnemonic device, it helps remind individuals who are in the program, who are in recovery, to manage their emotional and physical states, because these are things that can influence their vulnerability to relapse, right? Hunger, anger, loneliness, and tiredness tend to be things that trigger a relapse. And so being aware of those things is powerful, right? Anger can be the hardest of these triggers to overcome. And while there are times when anger is an absolutely appropriate response to a provocation, especially in the careers that we're in, it can also lead to impulsive and destructive behavior that causes harm to our reputations, to our relationships, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Silence, on the other hand, has the opposite effect. And I think that is what Marcus Aurelius is trying to tell us here. Silence, in this context, is not weakness. It's not passivity. It is not giving up. It is not being angry, but rather it is a deliberate choice to refrain from escalating a situation through verbal aggression or retaliation. It's an acknowledgement of the power of words to inflame passions, to perpetuate discord. It's a recognition of the value of restraint, of the value of self-control, and how that can diffuse a conflict. When we choose to remain silent in moments of anger, we create space for calmness. We create space for clarity. And when calmness and clarity emerge, it allows us to gain perspective on the situation and respond with appropriate means, to respond with wisdom rather than impulsivity. You see, Stoicism isn't about not having emotions. We still feel things. We still feel sadness. We still feel happiness. We still feel anger. We are not emotionless. We're not sociopaths when we practice Stoicism. It is an acknowledgement that there is that space in between a trigger and a response. And if we can live in that space, we can choose how we harness our emotions, how we choose to respond in a way that is not going to perpetuate or escalate a situation. It allows us to respond with wisdom and clarity when we catch ourselves in that moment between the trigger and the response and remain silent, remain calm, instead of allowing the anger to boil over. So the next time you're feeling that anger boiling up, remember those words HALT. Hunger, anger, loneliness, tiredness. You don't have to be in the program. You don't have to be in recovery to recognize the power of HALT, to recognize the power of that mnemonic device, to recognize the power of managing your emotional and physical state so that you are not vulnerable to what comes next. And that doesn't necessarily mean vulnerable to, a heightened likelihood to relapse or to fall into addiction. The what comes next can be the negative consequences of acting in an impassioned and impulsive way, of letting anger steer the ship. So take a breath, allow silence and self-control to temper the flames of passion before you respond. Remember that gap between trigger and response. That is your opportunity. That gap is your opportunity. One thing that I think might help is today's journal prompt. What I want you to do is take out your journal and I want you to write a list. This is stream of conscious. This doesn't have to be a well thought out thing. I want you to just take out your journal and I want you to stream of conscious, make a list of the things that trigger an angry response in you. What are the things that have happened to you this week? What happened this weekend? What has happened at work? What has happened in your home life? What are the things that tend to trigger an angry response in you? I want you to make that list so that you are consciously aware of these things that tend to cause you to boil over, that tend to cause the pot to boil over onto the stove, right? I want you to be consciously aware of these things. I want you to think about these things. And the best way to do that is to write them down so that you recognize and know these things. You recognize what it is that gets you angry so that you are more aware of them. When you are more aware of them, you are more capable of HALT. You are more capable of choosing to remain silent in those moments when you are triggered. You are more capable of creating space for calmness and clarity to emerge when you are angry if you know what those triggers are. So take a moment, write down all the things that make you angry so that you have them fresh at the top of your mind so that you can gain some control in that moment between the trigger and the reaction. Folks, that's what I got for you today. Thanks so much for listening. If you like this podcast and you would like to support this podcast, there's 3 great ways to do so. Number 1, you can pick up a copy of my book, In Valor, 365 Stoic Meditations for First Responders. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Walmart, anywhere you get your books. You can get it on Kindle or Nook for instant download right now, or you can order the paperback edition, which is my preference. That's available as well. You can highlight it. You can take notes in the columns. You can use it for your journal entries. It is a great resource for law enforcement and first responders and literally anyone listening, no matter what your career is, if you want to practice Stoic philosophy daily. And remember, this is a lived philosophy. We have to practice it every single day if it's going to have the impact and the effect and help us gain that greater resilience in our lives that we're looking for. The book is going to give you quotes. It's going to give you contextualization that's directly relatable to your life, to your career. And it's going to give you more of these daily journal prompts and action items to help you integrate the lessons again so we can focus on deeds, not words. Number 2, you can subscribe to the Substack, The Stoic Responder, for free. It's over there on Substack. Just go to thestoicresponder.substack.com. It'll take you directly there, or just Google The Stoic Responder. You'll find it. On that page, you can get these podcasts delivered directly to your email, and you'll also get my weekly newsletters delivered to your email. That's 1 to 2 times a week. I come up with a newsletter that shares Stoic leadership and personal development tips. If you're only listening on Apple or Spotify or iHeartRadio to the podcast and not subscribed to the Substack, you're missing out on those weekly newsletters. And finally, number 3, you can like, share, and subscribe this podcast. It's the easiest thing that you can do to promote this podcast and help others learn what we are doing here so that others can benefit from these lessons as well. Folks, I got one more episode for you this week. Hope you're having a great week thus far. Get out there, live your lives with valor, and until next time, you are out of roll. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to subscribe, like, rate, and share this podcast so that we can spread the benefits of Stoicism to other first responders. It will only take you a few moments, but it can help us tremendously. Until next time, out of roll.